welcome everyone. As the last speaker, I think I will refer to several other things that already have been mentioned, but primarily I will talk trying to really define what design or maybe fashion design research is. And then I mean compared to maybe more traditional means of design research, or what I was aware of, the design research as technical universities tries to define it and try to explore it, because that I think is a little bit a different story. And I've worked on it, on research to design, because we had the opportunity 2 or 3 years ago, when we started creative industry policies, to develop a call around design research. And then we had a lot of debates what exactly design research could attribute and what it should be. So that will be my main thing for today. And of course not everything is said and not everything is defined, but I will try to explore it. What is design research? I think this is an interesting project of Dan Rozengaarde. You probably have heard about the debate, because this is a smoke tower, polluted air comes in and fresh air goes out, and he was accused by making a gimmick, or he was the one who made the show with it, and actually behind it was a technical professor who found the procedure. And then I think, okay, but what is design? What is design research? I think the valuable thing is that you find like a real good story around it, that you really solve a problem in life, and that it's an imaginative, very imaginative world that you can contribute to and engage with. And I think that's an added value that Dan Rozengaarde really understands very well. And you need that part of an invention, because otherwise it won't never function. So that's one thing. And it doesn't mean that you have first the engineer and the innovation, and then a designer who makes something nice of it. I think that's also a very naive story. You should, especially in this time areas where so much is changing, you should team up from the very beginning. And that's what we worked for since 4 or 5 years at our Center of Expertise. So research, and this is a quote, normally, and then I refer to how technical universities normally engage with it. It's mostly directed to innovation, introduction of new processes, new technical engineering thing, new kind of product, and it's always, they have chemistry, physics, or other kinds of expertise behind it, and then rolls something out like this. And this, maybe you could see as something traditional, because the invention is a technical invention, and then there, of course, is a designer who makes a nice design of it. And I think more and more we should go and opt for something that is to a position where design research is more than that, where the artifact is a central key and central element, a part of the innovation, of part of a product, or maybe a product or an experience, whatever it is. And so the visual and iconic element of it is a very important part of it. So I think is really design research. The added value of a designer and a fashion designer is not only in making a product nice and aesthetic and maybe fit in a certain time, reflecting the zeitgeist, but it's more than that. Design research, when did it start? And especially fashion design research, when did it start? So I think a lot of is done basic things in the UK in the 1960s, when we talk about design research. Fashion design research starts somewhere in the 1980s, 1990s, when universities, when vocal education became university, and when there was a art and humanities fund where fashion designers could team up with scientists. And this is a very nice example of it. It's already there for maybe 10 years. And it's a fashion designer who teamed up with a scientist, with a chemist, around the idea that she had seen in Asia. She was there and people are drinking tea in Mongolia, but they just put some hot water towards it and it becomes a very strong tea. And after a few days you have a cellulose layer on top of it. So she tried to experiment with this cellulose. And when you dry it, you get a sort of leather. So this was really done in collaboration with a technical person, but more and more she developed it. And the latest news is that she now is in New York, where she has a startup and where she really tries to upscale it and make it really a product out of it. So this is, I think, a nice area where you could see that a fashion designer teams up because there was funding, but also try to explore new possibilities and come up in collaborative with a new kind of product. But what is fashion design? What is design? Is that a functional product? It should be more than a gadget? Where is it innovative? For example, here, Iris van Herpen shows an innovative product, but in the end, fashion shows a lot about new products, but very rarely an innovative product. I think it's very hard. Design has also a commercial part. Should it sell? Is it something that needs consumers? In design research, test beds are for a very long time also a thing. Yeah? What's the consumer asking for? Is he related to it? In fashion, it's seldom seen because it's still a push market where you just come with a new collection and a new collection. In the end, maybe 30% is not sold. It's not. It's still not. It hasn't changed yet, but it could change. And for fashion is, of course, always very important that it reflects the aesthetic of the time. But I think it's more below this. I think you should define design and fashion design better. And I think in the end, and then we come back to cultural terms, and I agree, humanities is very important. I think humanities has a role, should take another role. Fashion design and design, they define the here and the now, or maybe you could say the future. They shape it, they give shape, form to where we are and what we want to wear, how we want to live. And also how we want to consume, and maybe that's the most important question of nowadays. What do we really want to consume? What we are offered, or do we want to consume sustainable? Do we want to consume less? How do we deal with technology? All those questions, I think, is the designer can deal with it and comes up with it. And in the end, it expresses a whole value system. But mainly we keep that unconscious, and we are very rarely aware of things because the fashion industry, for example, they talk about the system of the heritage brand. And when you actually look at it, it's something that maybe for 20 years exists now. Why shouldn't it exist longer? Maybe it doesn't. It isn't so important anymore. Maybe in the new time area when we look different to the world, we will come up, and I'm convinced of it, with maybe a whole other definition of what fashion is, what we would like to wear, how we want to consume it, and also, I think in designers and architectural terms, what is the environment where we want to live in. And I think designers can contribute there a lot. So they also can, in that sense, be part of innovation and things that are new technologies, but also maybe also big challenges. I think that's the world where they can engage with and where they have to engage with. So it means that the classical designer, the 1990s designer, for example, the Droog designer, but also the fashion designer, and I was in Milan this week and people from the industry said the fashion designer, he should reinvent himself. So the fashion designer is no longer the artist who sits in his atelier or as a student works on his collection, and then when the catalog show is there, there's the industry and they're coming to look for the next designer and it will be shown in the magazine. It's not there anymore, and the designer should take up another position and should deal with other issues to become the next designer. so design research is primarily also, it's about the artifact. But the real and important things, I think, it should become, the things that are becoming really, and artifacts are important where they become icons. So, of course, you can produce a lot, but the real artifact becomes an icon. It becomes something that leads alive in magazines or people talk about. And then there's always like a concept, an idea, a thought behind it that makes it unique. It's not only an aesthetic because it's so beautiful. And the best one, they don't there are not solutions for problems, but they really start a debate. They're exploring things, they ask questions, or they give society a mirror. And for example, this is from a graphic artist, and it's just a survey you have to go through. So it's a very day-to-day thing, but when you go to the survey, you become aware of a lot of strange things. So it's also about questioning, exploring. It's not about solutions, but it's also about things that you feel as normal are presenting as maybe not as normal as they are. So yeah, okay, we can go quickly to this, but I think it's a little bit, so design has a lot of tacit knowledge. Science is always transparent. Logically, design is based on trust, belief. Science is objective. Typically for design, training is the master-apprentice relationship, something difficult to replace. And documentation, portfolio, diaries, against facts and figures. And of course there's always the discussion, who is a good designer? Is the designer one who presents an artifact and also has a portfolio or maybe has published an article? So he's, yeah, where is the balance? But I think this is more like general outputs that are different. The scope of design research is also far more open. I think it's more looking towards a future or just go open, start from its passion, fascination for a phenomenon. And this, I think, is always a very nice example. Adele Farsous, she was here 2 years as a guest professor at our school. What she has done, I think, is really, she has finished her PhD now. She started to walk around in her pyjama first, and she was aware that it made like a tremendous impression on street and everywhere where she came. So then she decided to make like a PhD project out of it, public life, private life, the impression that clothes makes on you. What she did is just, she was wearing jumpsuit for each day another one, and she always, a public life, private life, she was wearing the jumpsuit. And halfway her PhD, she asked for a volunteer to swap wardrobes. So she took her half a year to find a Chinese guy, and at a certain moment they swapped wardrobe. So she was wearing for half a year his suits, and he was wearing her jumpsuit. And then you come on, this is getting people out of the comfort zone, getting in discussion, getting related about what actually we are doing with our daily clothes. It opens at the same time also the universe of what fashion and clothing is up, because it's very narrow system. A lot of people always think we don't have anything with fashion because it's something for the people who deal with fashion, but everyone is wearing clothes, so there is a very strange mixture. We are supposed to replace our clothes or to go for the next trend, and at the same time we have all clothes that we are very attached to, that are sitting comfortable. So there are all layers. And I think it's the task of a designer to open up the universe and to make us aware of all those relations that we have with the daily things that surround us. This is also a very nice example. This is a fashion designer who went to an empty factory, was a textile factory, was closed. She went there for 30 days. Each day she made one garment, and people came to visit her, normal visitors, but also people who had worked in the factory. And she, all the stories she was told, she embroidered on the white cotton, and they were laid out like a whole experiment. This is also a power of what you could say of design research in another layer, fashion design research, because it broadens the scope, but it makes also the impact that you can engage people, that you can come up and tell stories, and that that you can just end with a sort of reality. That's a nice added story. So it's quite diverse what you can fit in design or design research, but imagination, exploring where we are and where we're heading to is a very important element. Here you can also say it could be, in a lot of times it's a good solution for big problems. It's a manner when you add a designer to teams with complex products, or when you have engineers what we actually are doing with, for example, students and teachers from Wageningen University, or for the Technical University in Eindhoven, or textile engineers in Saxion. We try to learn each other's language and from the start work together in fixing, trying to bring back, for example, local production and also circular ideas, growing hemp, making textile of it and bring it again, recycled in the chain. And this is an example of a palm leather, but he's also working with other kind of material. And this is one of the projects we also did, got funded in the new creative industry policies. And I think this is really a nice project where I think a lot of things come together. It's called Crafting Wearables. And the aim of the research is, can we bring technology to the beyond the gadget level? Can it become a real product? And the second thing is, what actually does mean technology when it really is part of the body, or becomes part of the body. So this research bit is set up, so the humanities department of the Radboud Universiteit in Nijmegen has one PhD who does the humanities side of the body and technology. ArtEZ brought in Pauline van Dongen as a fashion designer who tried to bring in several kinds of technology into a real product and even a fashionable product. And we had the help of the Technical University in Eindhoven, who are specialized in wearables and interaction design. So 3 different worlds came together in this project, where I think especially the humanities aspect is quite important, because that makes the bigger story of the... So what Pauline of course did is a very practical, but also I think really a designer's level of, quite intuitive, where you bring things together. But also there's two areas, because engineering and practical design are at a certain point quite near to each other, because you all experiment and you go to a next step and in the end a product. But I think from an interaction designer, it's just about how things function, and in the end you have an innovation, and from the designer in the end you have a wonderful product. But there's also a story behind it, what really culture is changing and what it adds to your body and what we actually reflect and how it affects our identity or all those areas. So when you bring them together, I think you get maybe the right kind of complexity and maybe expertise to really bring, to really push the area where we are to give answers, I think, in another direction. So I think these kind of things are very important. And it means also, that you are just, for a designer, step out of this only being artistic or only be in the field of the classical way of making nice products, but in the end you deal with the issues of this time. I think the last thing is just again, because we had to do it for getting the goal together. So I think it's not so design looks more towards the future. Science is more on what's existing and trying to make a logical conclusion. Design proposals are more speculative. The scientist is more logical. And what Jogunal said, it's more on an abductive mode of reasoning. It's a little bit guessing, or it's just our proposals. It's not like it is as it is. And abduction involves creating, a new imagination. So, and that makes it really different from deduction or induction, what already was discussed. And then maybe the last thing here is to say the artifact is really a central thing in it. And I think it's the artifact, of course you could say a real PhD is also the documentation I think behind it, but the artifact should have something, it's of course a subjective thing, but it really is something that the public should engage to. An artifact is always something that as an audience you immediately recognize as something that means something, that has a relevancy. And of course the relevancy is always in a certain time period, I think, but maybe more than before, it's not only relevant in the universe of the heritage and the traditions that you come from, because we are addressing other and bigger issues. So the relevance of the artifact is not like only a Western fashion history or Western design history, but it's also a social or cultural relevance that I think is felt by everyone. So, and not only the ones who know the traditions and are good in that. And this, I think, is just the last one, just to show, because this is quite a linear technical design research, this figure. And it's just to add that, I don't know, maybe it was, you talked about this circular idea, but I think more, of course, this is, I think, in a linear way, you do this, but I think beyond this, it's also important to work with other people in another context and to really be aware of the soft and sensible side of design, and not only bring it back to a structure where you just do some theory, when you do some exploration, but also keep the imagination alive. I think that's already said. Maybe this was the last one. This is very dress for our time. It's a dress made by a fashion designer, launched at St. Pancras, and it's of course a flag, but he made a dress out of it, and it's full of data of pollution. And I think this one, so it deals with problems without making them very explicit and without solving them. But at the same time, they become very strong as just a presentation. And then you can, of course, say, what in the end is research and what is an artifact, what is art, what is fashion, what is research, and what is requested for it. And I think you have some guidelines, but in the end, I think it is the artifact and the ideas that go behind it and the way it's wrapped up or how it's documented. It's primarily the way it's received and picked up by an audience and by, I think, critics. And at the same time, it just can be very different. So the artifact is central in it. I think I leave it for here. because, yeah. Thank you.